I'm not too sure what portion of my audience out there play top lane, but for those of you who've stuck with the lane throughout its dark ages, I don't need to tell you that Riot has been pretty neglectful of top in terms of new champion releases. The last top laner to be released was Gnar, who came out over a year ago in October of 2014. Before that, you have to go all the way back to mid-2013 to see the next new, maybe meant for top lane champions being Zac and Aatrox. These guys have since been played much more often in the jungle rather than top lane nowadays, meaning before Gnar, if you want to go back to the next new champion who's been played exclusively top lane since release, you have to go all the way back to May of 2012, where we saw the release of Darius, a champion so old he's since been reworked. Top has quite often been the role that Riot has tried to put new champions in somewhat often, but while designing their kits, they just so happen to make them perfect for other roles, typically being the jungle. It seemed like they abandoned the lane for a while, not releasing any new champions meant for top lane for a very long stretch, only mixing stuff up recently through the rework department, but as of a few days ago, that finally seems to be changing as the new champion Illaoi was released. It goes without saying that I was really intrigued when I saw promotional material for Illaoi, seeing her named as a real top laner, defined as a juggernaut no less. Seeing the word juggernaut triggered me a bit, but I was super hyped to just see a new champion that seemed built exclusively for top lane, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on her. I've been playing Illaoi for the past few days or so, and today I want to give my thoughts on the champion, some first impressions, and talk about whether or not Riot put a good foot forward here as they stepped back into releasing new champions for top lane. Before I begin, I'd rather not go through all the abilities and every detail of what they do before giving my opinions on her kit. There's plenty of champion spotlights, preview videos, and tooltips that you guys have probably already seen. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the core of how Illaoi works and just how well she seems to work in League. Now, the first thing you probably notice when you take a look at Illaoi is, of course, her new passive mechanic, the tentacles. These noodly appendages will spawn near terrain Illaoi walks by once every 15 seconds and will interact with her abilities in various ways, namely slapping opponents when commanded to. It's important to note it takes a while to set up where you want to place your tentacles. Setting one down every 15 seconds takes a fair amount of effort, and since they're a pretty large source of your damage, you generally want at least two nearby at all times. These guys really are a very big portion of your DPS. I'm merely pulling numbers out of thin air here, but from my experience playing as and against her, it feels like a solid 33% to 50% of your DPS comes through your tentacles. That's an important thing to note, since Illaoi, being a juggernaut and all, can only really provide damage to a team. She has some weird utility in her kit. She has a tiny bit of sustain with her Q, and a very odd E ability that we're going to get into a little later, but everything in her kit is all for the sake of laying out damage. She doesn't have a big crowd control thing, no Malphite ulti or Gnar ulti, no serious movement abilities to jump around the map. Whatever utility she does have, it's just for the sake of laying out more damage. That's what she does best, and really that's the only thing she can do for a team. Because so much of her damage comes through her tentacles, Illaoi is a champion who spends most of her time in lane. She requires a lot of setup to maximize her burst, meaning that you shouldn't have to worry about her roaming around the map or always TP ganking bot. She needs at least a few seconds to put a tentacle down, and she can't place them down on command at the start of a fight like you can with, say, Gangplank's barrels. Rather, she seems like a champion who's focused almost entirely on setting up shop in a lane and then just dominating that singular lane. Setting up tentacles properly can allow you to 1v1 or sometimes 1v2 in many situations with the slightest of leads. Another thing to note about this tentacle mechanic is it's super conducive to snowballing. A player can reset the lane when playing against an Illaoi when Illaoi backs to base, giving you some time to clear out all the tentacles, which actually is a little punishing since you miss CS. But outside of that, there doesn't feel like much a player can do when losing lane. Illaoi has some pretty great poke and harass with all her abilities. She has sustain with her Q that also pokes for good damage, and ways to harass you from all the way across the map. She's also a champion that after she gains lane control, she won't give it up, and once she starts strategically setting tentacles down, it's really difficult to clear them and can be quite punishing if you try and do so at the wrong moment. Potentially the most interesting and most infuriating thing about Illaoi though is her E ability. This is the ability that yanks the soul out of a champion and makes it stand next to Illaoi, also proccing any tentacles nearby to attack it. Your soul will throw a portion of the damage done to it back at you, and if it dies or if you leave the area, then you become a vessel. Being a vessel is the most annoying thing introduced to League of Legends that I have seen in a very long time. Maybe it's because this is a new mechanic and we're all just getting used to it, but it seems incredibly frustrating and pretty difficult to play against. When you're a vessel, all tentacles will automatically try and attack you if you walk in range, and on top of that, you spawn tentacles anywhere you walk once every 10 seconds that of course will attack you as soon as they spawn. That means that if you become a vessel, you're getting harassed by these guys no matter where you are on the map. It has unlimited range and stays with you a full minute or until you kill 3 tentacles, which typically takes at least 30 seconds or so if you're just killing the ones you're spawning. The thing that's so frustrating about this ability though is it feels like there's no way to play against it. It's such a punishing thing if you get hit. The ability itself is a skill shot, so you can kind of play around it like that, but if you get hit, there's nothing you can do. Running away makes you a vessel automatically, which as we've explained sucks balls. The only option you have is to try and stay in the little area of your soul. You take damage from the soul getting beat on, and you typically can't fight the opposing Illaoi to try and keep her from killing your soul, since if she plays right, she'll have pulled your soul to nearby tentacles, which will AoE damage you if you engage. And again, this is something that will snowball the lane super hard. This typically makes you lose control, you lose CS, you have to back to base, you're no longer focused on doing anything other than just not getting smashed and dying. Meanwhile, Illaoi will get to farm and control the lane for free, setting up more tentacles safely that full 30 to 60 seconds while you're busy running around like a chicken with its head cut off. These are my first impressions of the ability after playing with and against it for a few days. There's probably more you can do to dodge getting hit by it and maybe play against it. I'm sure the community will figure out this mechanic isn't actually as annoying as it is when you first meet it, but I feel as though for now, this ability is way too punishing for a single E that has a 12-second cooldown. Giving you a minute-long debuff that harasses your champion all across the map with unlimited range does not feel fun to play against, and although it might not be that good, as in it's not super overpowered or anything, to Riot's credit, it feels pretty balanced, it still doesn't make the ability any less annoying. All in all though, Illaoi's kit feels like it synergizes pretty well with itself and allows you to pull off some pretty crazy wombo combos for massive damage. In teamfights, you require less of a setup as you do in laning phase, since your ultimate will spawn a tentacle for each enemy champion hit, meaning that in a big fight you can still get that ridiculous DPS burst that juggernauts typically have. Again, she feels as though she can't really provide much anything other than damage, although she can slightly control where her opponents might go sometimes by landing that E ability, since they might not want to run away immediately unless they get turned into a vessel, but her lack of utility isn't the greatest hindrance to her, as her damage is more than enough to make up for it. I would say there isn't a great chance we see Illaoi being picked in competitive play often, since she requires a lot of setup in the early phases of the game and doesn't provide a lot of top lane utility that other champions like Gnar can provide. Her inability to TP gank or provide massive CC might scare some teams away from using her in comps, unless she's like a Darius or something where her damage is just so massively OP they can't help but pick her. Nevertheless, even if she doesn't end up being a good pick for competitive play, I think she's a solid step in the right direction for the champion design team working their way back top lane. She's a champion with a unique skill set that's pretty skill intensive, where she does really well if she's played correctly and will typically flop if she's not. Interesting mechanics that flow very well with her kit and feel as though they belong to a top laner, and she seems like a viable and interesting pick for players that figure the kit out. I would suggest any top laners out there give her a shot, since she's pretty damn fun and quite good in the right hands. I mean, you get a rush like you did a line of coke every time you get a massive ulti off that AoEs an entire enemy team, smashing them with tentacles as they were chasing you down 3v1 about to kill you. She seems like a really rewarding and fun champion without having too much of an overloaded kit, and will probably be quite fun for the top laners who yearn for the days of old where lane dominance could have such a big effect on a match. Thank you all very much for watching this video. Before you go, I'd like to ask you if you would like to see more champion review type videos. Feel free to leave a like or a comment or something to give me some sort of feedback on this video if you enjoyed it and would like to see more. I could do these videos for every new champion or rework, or even go back with older champions. I feel like I have something to talk about. But either way though, I'll see you all in the next video, and until then, thank you very much for watching. Good luck in solo queue and have a wonderful day.